Hello, everyone. How you doing? My name's Benner, and welcome back to another edition of Takeover Tuesday. Yeah, like I said, I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and we've got a great, amazing special guest coming up tonight. We had Lauren Messervey take over our Instagram all day today, posting some awesome photos about her writing career and all things horror, and we're going to dive right into that right away. But we've got kind of a new format for the show happening. I'm coming live to you from the Black Fawn Distribution studio, and just we wanted to provide a couple of news updates before we jump in, just because there's a lot of news to let you know about. So look, we've got this awesome re-release of Bite dropping in Sunrise Records locations across Canada. So this was a re-release using this new retro artwork that was completed by our friends over at Fiction Design, as well as Small Dog. They kind of combined and put out this really, really cool sort of retro kind of artwork. It's only available through Sunrise Records. So it's available across the country. Obviously, the Ontario stores aren't open yet. However, they will be soon, and you can pick up your copy there. So it's on sale as well, which is a great idea for the summer. And also, if you've already picked up picked up Bite previously, we also have the retro artwork available. Just the sleeves, just the slipcases. They're available in our online store. We also have some Black Fawn Distro T-shirts available, as well as a limited run of Black Fawn Distro hoodies, backed by popular demand, and they are also available in our online store, which you can check out at www.blackfawndistribution.com/store. So without further ado, the one last thing I wanted to let you guys know about is that we have partnered up with these guys, Deadly Grounds Coffee, the most amazing coffee company in the world. They are a horror themed coffee company that has all kinds of goodies. If you check out their store or their cafe in Durham, it's an absolute destination to go to if you're looking for something to do now that they are open. They've got a whole bevy of drinks and stuff, but they do roast coffee as well. So we've partnered up with them. We're actually doing our own Black Fawn Distro blend. It's called Appetite for Caffeination, Sweet Toffee O' Mine, a little bit of an homage to Guns N' Roses, of course, and it will be available soon. So make sure you check those guys out, and just kind of give them a little bit of a shout out. We're going to just drop a quick quick commercial. If you haven't heard of Deadly Grounds, check them out online. You can pick up their coffee, order it right to your door, and also swing by their cafe if you get a second. And when we come back, we're going to jump into the studio with our guest, Lauren, and we're going to start talking about all things horror. So right after the break.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
All right, and we're back, and we're live with Lauren Messervey. How are you, Lauren? Thanks again for taking over our Instagram all day today, and welcome to the program. It's great to have you. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but first and foremost, where are you coming from, and what's new?
I am currently in Winnipeg, Manitoba, just hanging out here. My husband and I actually just moved here about, I want to say 3.5 weeks ago. So it's been a little bit of a fun ride. We were in Toronto, I think, collectively for like 30 years, and him for 20, me for 10. And so it's a big change of pace, but it's actually a really beautiful province. What people don't know, it's not just like a bunch of wheat. It's actually pretty epic. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how things open up here, because apparently the art scene is fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard that out there, and also a pretty good hockey team out there as well. I know the winters are kind of cold, but it's nice to hear that that's probably somewhere there where a lot of Canadians should venture out to check out that part of the country. I don't think it sounds like it doesn't get enough love out there, right?
Totally doesn't. And like, there's a lot of really, because the winters are so cold and evil, there's always a lot of really cool stuff that happens in the winters, like all kinds of cool festivals and like all kinds of a great fine dining on ice. It's just a place that I think people need to discover a little bit better and realize how great it is. So
Awesome.
far,
Well,
thumbs up.
thumbs up. Okay, so and listen, thanks again for doing this. I know it takes a lot of time and commitment to take it over for our Instagram for the day and for joining us, but we really do appreciate it. And for those of you tuning in right now, we are broadcasting live to Facebook Live, YouTube, as well as Twitch. And if you have a comment or a question for Lauren about horror writing, that's going to be the focus of this episode. Leave it down in the comments below, and we will try and throw it up during the broadcast, and we'll try and get you some answers. Lauren, you're a horror writer, also horror screenwriter now. What drew you to the genre to begin with? Like, can you walk us through sort of, I saw your post about The Shining, and we'll talk about that as well, because I have a story like that as well about The Shining. But what drew you to the genre to begin with, and what continues to inspire you when you're kind of pursuing stuff that has to do with horror?
I think that originally, I actually vividly remember, I don't know if Ontario, if you guys had Jumbo Video, it was
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
Such a great space. My parents used to take me there when I was a kid. And for some reason, I would always kind of gravitate towards the horror section, because I really thought that the covers were weird. They were creepy. And I vividly remember the cover to Pet Sematary when it first came out. And I remember looking at it as like a tiny 4-year-old and being like, "Ooh, this looks so scary. I want to see it." And my parents were like, "You're out of your mind. There's no way that we're going to let you watch that." So I was so involved with like wanting to see these cool things that I was looking at the video store every day, that my mom made an agreement with me when I was about 9. She said, "Well, how about this? How about when you tune 14, I'm going to show you my 2 favorite classic horror movies, and we'll watch them together and we'll discuss them. And you can tell me what you think, and then we can kind of like go from there." And like I said on Instagram today, it was Carrie and The Shining. And both of them
Classics.
scared me. Total classics. Both of them still kind of creep me out in different ways. But I was pretty hooked from then. And then it was kind of like an interesting bonding experience that my mother and I have, that we still kind of have. And for me, it's just, there's kind of like that little bit of love there, that kind of, just the bonding experience just kind of remains, and it has like a special place in my heart. But I also find that as I've grown older, and you deal with like specific traumas and difficulties in your life, horror has given me the outlet to sort of psychologically experience some of the things that I'm dealing with in a controlled environment. Like horror kind of magnifies anxiety and all of the worst parts of humanity, but in a way where it's kind of fun, and it's safe, and you can kind of really explore the darkness and still be removed enough so that you can just be yourself and be able to be in a kind of contained environment. So with horror now, what I love about kind of this revolutionary horror is there are so many different new and amazing directors and writers who are coming out, who are creating incredible stuff. Like one of my favorite horror writers right now is, I don't know if you're familiar with Victor LaValle, but like he took a Lovecraft tale and put it through the perspective of a Black man, which has never been done before. And like Lovecraft was renowned for his racist commentaries, and a lot of his fiction was just awful and in that way. And so now to have an author take it and kind of make it his own and put a different spin on it is just an incredible thing that horror has been able to do. And so you have directors like Jordan Peele, and even to some extent like Issa Lopez, who did what is that amazing movie, Spanish movie, Tigers Are Not Afraid, where you get to so good, where you get to see like horror through the lens of different cultures and people of different experiences. And that's what's really inspiring me right now, is just to see how many different ways and how many different stories we can tell from so many different perspectives.
Well, what's funny too is like I have this conversation all the time, and I think it probably really started with when they released Get Out, and when Get Out was such a here's a horror movie that is no different from any horror movie that you've watched growing up. However, it's through this different lens, and because it's through a different lens, like you'd never seen it before, it was a completely different take. And it's always like, I always feel like it's great to have a couple more voices at the table, right? Because
Yeah.
you might see things from a different perspective, and that's a cool thing to do. So I think it's fascinating. I agree. Like, I think that it's going to maybe just kind of jumpstart certain horror franchises or new franchises, new stories in a way that I don't think people really originally thought that they would. And I think that's exciting as a movie fan, as a horror fan. Because I don't know, it's so odd. We were talking just before we got on the air, and we can jump right into this because I think it's a natural segue. But like, women in horror and how women are represented in horror, and now that those stories are being told not necessarily just from an actress's point of view as they were in the past, but from a screenwriter's point of view, a director's point of view. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, where do you want to see that go?
Well, just more. We just need more of those stories. Like, I think undebatably one of the scariest movies that I've seen in a really long time was The Babadook, by Jennifer Kent. And her follow-up, The Nightingale, is probably one of the most disturbing movies I'd seen in a really long time too. And as a person who used to specifically only try to watch the most disturbing movies ever made, like Serbian films, Salo, Irreversible, seen them all, that's a really high bar to kind of cross. She really created something that had such an atmosphere of anxiety and terror in both films that really speaks not just to sort of a visceral level, but also to an emotional level. And I find that a lot of the women who are kind of stepping in are giving this lens of this more emotional, terrifying horror. Even the actresses like Ari Aster's Hereditary, Toni Collette is a great example of just a powerhouse of a performance that is terrifying because it is so emotionally driven. Which is not to say that the men out there aren't creating emotionally driven horror. That's not necessarily the case, but it's just a different way of doing it. So moving forward, I just like to see more of it. I'd like to see more women stepping behind the camera, creating stories that speak to their experiences, and also to see more women of color doing the same thing. And I think that that's something that has been sorely missed for a very, very long time, and is something that we're talking about more now. In terms of those films, it's going to just add more levels to what horror can be, because I found that for so long horror was just about scaring the audience. Like, we had that whole section where we did slashers in the 90s, and then we had like that moment where we were all obsessed with Japanese horror in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And now we're in this place where horror is not just horror. Horror is also comedy. Horror is also drama. Horror can be several genres simultaneously, and it all adds to the pot. Like, it's undebatable that things like Midsommar is also kind of a comedy, and like Get Out is definitely a comedy as well. And it's interesting being able to go to a place where we can make really popular and awesome horror movies and not have to stick to a specific kind of a specific script and a specific storyline that used to be like what would get the audiences to come in. You know what I mean? Like, audiences want to see more. They want to feel more from their films. And that's what's really awesome about now.
Well, I think part of this too is that because women haven't necessarily had a chance and an opportunity to tell their own stories, that they are telling these unique stories, these stories that we've never heard before, especially in the theater atmosphere or in cinema. But that's also, I think, challenging just male filmmakers as well to say, well, okay, well, these movies are operating at a different level, so therefore, I mean, I should really put some thought into this, and it's not just necessarily this slasher, like paint by numbers type of thing. It's going to have some heart to it. It's going to have some more character development. I see that kind of bleeding into horror too, a lot more now than it was. Yep. I mean, I think recently I just watched all the Friday the 13th movies, one through 8. No, that's not true. Sorry. I watched all the one right up to Jason X. So 1 through 10.
Okay. And it was good work.
It was pretty funny. Like, just seeing how, like, those, they're classic movies. They're such a fun franchise to dive into. Yeah. But ultimately they knew what they had, right? And they were like, let's just roll out another one. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the 80s. It was how they did Friday the 13th Part 4, and it's called The Final Chapter. and there's like another at least 6 sequels, like true sequels to that movie afterwards.
Oh, totally.
And
I just
more
recently
after that.
watched. I watched, what was it? I watched Freddy versus Jason recently.
We were just talking
'cause
about that. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that movie, debatable, but I think it was a bit ahead of its time because that movie is hilarious and it's supposed to be hilarious. And it definitely follows like the old typical slasher format, but like similar to the Scream, like the Scream, I guess, not trilogy, whatever you would call the 4 films, is it's kind of self-aware of its own inadequacies and its own strangeness and its own faults, and it makes it more fun to watch that. And films like that have become infinitely more popular over the past few years. And so I think that the Jason franchise and some of the Freddy films have kind of like they were the first ones in the 80s to kind of start it, and now we're kind of like going full circle.
I remember, it's funny. I was just talking with somebody about Freddy versus Jason, and yeah, I 100% agree. I can't believe they never made a sequel. I know there was a lot of talk about them making Freddy versus Jason versus Michael, or Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, and everyone was like,
so good.
Because I remember I went to see that movie in the theater, and I remember everyone like hooting and hollering. Like it was like going to actually see like a boxing fight or a UFC fight like at the theater, because everyone was cheering every kill. And like when they first like show up, when they first face off, like the whole audience was just like, whoa, like people were jazzed because they'd been talking about doing that for forever. And I can't believe like that movie, like I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the watchability factor on movies and what makes a movie kind of rewatchable to the extent that we watch horror movies. And I always feel that movie has a ton of rewatchability, and it's a one-off. Like they never did anything further with it, which is bizarre. It's strange, right? So I don't know, maybe someone can pick that baton up and run with it.
I mean, you can always go back. There was like, I mean, if you look at the Halloween franchise too, there was a really, really long period of time where it was like Halloween H2O. And then Rob Zombie did his remake, and now they're doing Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis back. Like there's always time to go back and do it. So I have some confidence that maybe one day they will actually do that and bring and like maybe bring a third. Like Michael Myers would be perfect, but I would like to see Ash versus both of them. I think that would be the ultimate.
So big rumor that they are going to make Evil Dead 2 Evil Dead 4 or Army of Darkness 2 or whatever they're going to do, which is crazy. Because that's another movie that I remember I watched. I always have an interesting conversation with people about Evil Dead because for some reason or another, I ended up seeing Army of Darkness first and then worked my way backwards. So I watched that trilogy in reverse order. And I remember getting to the first one being like, wait a second, how did they just made the second movie as just a remake of the first movie? Like, how is this like, I didn't, as a kid, I didn't understand it. Right. But now I look back and it's like,
I actually watched the second one first because I watched it with my boyfriend at the time, and he said, oh, this is a much better movie than the first one. So I watched the second one first and I enjoyed it. And I actually totally disagreed with him. Like the first movie, the original Evil Dead, is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I just absolutely loved it. For all of its glorious faults and all of its glorious creepiness, like it is still a creepy movie. And about the watchability factor, for me, it's like if you still kind of feel a little uneasy or you get a tinge of that original uneasiness that you had when you first watch it, I think that that's a really good indication of a rewatchable horror film. And then if you just enjoy the experience so much, if every time you see something new, if you notice something new. I remember years ago I watched the first Evil Dead again with a couple of my guy friends, and there's one scene where you literally see the boom operator like right under the bridge as they're like crossing the bridge. It's fantastic. Like it's there. They've never decided to edit him out, even though they have the technology. They're just like, yeah, let's do it. There's this guy under the bridge. Cool. We're going to keep him there. And I really respect a film like that. And there are moments where you go through the film and you see, okay, like there's a sound editing thing here. There's like a prop that's not supposed to be here. That guy shouldn't be standing there. I definitely see the boom. But because it is so incredibly iconic, and because it has those terrifying moments with the possessed, with the Deadites, it's just awesome.
it's
Like,
one of those.
it doesn't get better.
We were talking earlier about horror and comedy sort of merging together, and that seemingly happening a bit more. And it's funny because having just thought about it, I wonder if that's where it stems from. Does it stem from Evil Dead 2? Because that's a movie, like, I feel Evil Dead 1 was made to be a scary movie, whereas the second one is like, it's half of that. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
But the other half of it is just Sam Raimi going like, wouldn't it be funny if we did this? Like, it'll be so mental if we put this in this movie. Because, and I wonder, there's a whole generation of people who watched that wasn't sure what they were actually watching. When they actually took it in, because you mentioned The Shining earlier, and so my story about The Shining is that I always remember this. I think I was like 12 years old or 13 years old, probably 12, I think. And my dad was like, "Hey, you want to see a scary movie?" And it was like middle of the day. It was like, I don't know, 4 PM. And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "This is a scary movie. It's got one of my favorite actors in it, which was Jack Nicholson, which was, whatever. He's every dad's favorite actor
Totally.
From that.
My dad's favorite actor too. Yeah.
Yeah. Who didn't like Jack Nicholson? Right. So it's called The Shining. And I was like, The Shining. And I watched that. I remember I had a Crispy Crunch. I'll never forget this. I had a Crispy Crunch candy bar in the fridge that I had from a couple days ago, and I was saving it. And I was like, I'm going to eat this Crispy Crunch bar while watching this movie. And I remember getting halfway through that movie and being like, what the fuck? I don't even know what I'm watching. Like, this is like, I felt like the movie was haunted. It felt like it was possessed. Like, I just remember, anyway, I watched it in the middle of the day, and that movie still kind of freaks me out to this day, just because it's so unique and as far as the atmosphere goes. And like, and Jack, there's a scene where, like, I watched it recently during the pandemic last year. And there's that scene where, like, Jack Nicholson is just standing there in that sweater, and he's just kind of zoning out, looking out the window.
Yeah, and he's just staring, and he
looks so psycho.
My favorite thing that I learned about The Shining, so, like, I'm a huge David Lynch fan, which I think if you love horror, you've at least dabbled a bit in David Lynch. But apparently Stanley Kubrick gave the music supervisor Eraserhead. And he said, compose the music as to how this film makes you feel. And that's why the music in The Shining is so unsettling, because this guy watched Eraserhead and it just like ruined his life. So he goes and he makes this incredible score that just adds so much to the tension of the film. But it's kind of a beautiful mess in a way, because I don't know, have you read the book?
I've never read the book, but yeah, I'm aware that Stephen King disowned the movie, hated it, and I heard about the stuff with Dr. Sleep and how that film sort of rectified those two conflicting universes, right? And
it did an amazing job too. Like, I was very skeptical of Dr. Sleep, and then when I saw it, I was like, oh boy, like, they really did their homework on this. Because what's interesting about the book The Shining is it's an entirely a different story. There is nothing in the book that happens in the movie. Absolutely nothing. It is in its own right a different story. And King's biggest problem with it, or one of the biggest problems, was the fact that, and I totally get this, Jack Nicholson looks unhinged from the start. Whereas in the book, Jack Torrance is a really lovely man. He's a very kind, gentle, wonderful person who is just really, really trying to get his life together, who has made some mistakes, who's accidentally hurt his son, who is just beside himself because of it. And it's the hotel that destroys him. Right? Yeah. In the film, it's kind of unclear if it's the hotel that's destroying him. Obviously, it's Catalyst, but you see in him this twisted thing that already exists. And King was like, well, no, that's not the character. That gives up the entire heart of the story, which, if you read the book, he's totally right. Having said that, The Shining, if you look at it as the film as a totally different story, is just an absolute masterpiece on its own. But yeah, I get King's issue, but it's still a classic regardless.
I know there was just an article. I didn't actually read the whole thing, but there was an article about the guy at the end, the walrus guy, the guy that's, I think, is he in a walrus costume or whatever? He's in one.
It's like a bear or dog thing.
Bear or dog. And the article was like, nobody actually knows who the hell that guy was. Like, nobody actually knows who it was. Like, it's just some guy. And I don't know if he might be dead now. I'm not sure, but they were like, nobody knows who this person is. He's just in the movie. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. I'd like only
Yeah.
it would only be in that movie. Like if it was in, if it was in some other movie, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, who cares? But The Shining, I don't know. It was it's a movie that made an impact on me for sure. And I love Dr. Sleep as well. I thought it was really, really well done. Underrated film,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, totally. When I watched that, I was like, "Ooh, Rose the Hat. That is how I want to dress for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
That is awesome. She is great. Yeah, it was really, really interesting. Like I didn't read the book, but I was just such a fan of how and especially the actor. What is his name? He played Elliot in E.T. God, he was he was a good Jack Torrance. It was like it took me a minute to be like this. Like, is that not Jack Nicholson in the
Oh, really?
80s? Yeah,
Yeah.
He just the mannerism, everything, he got it.
I thought it was interesting how they recast the actors, the characters in the movie, which I thought was pretty. It must have been a tough call to do that, but I'm glad they did that as opposed to like maybe like de-aging people or doing any of the other CGI, hocus pocus. Just because I just felt it resonated a bit more. I don't know. It was a very ambitious film to make, especially in this day and age. So, but glad they made it for sure. So,
absolutely.
Let's jump into a couple comments. We've got just a couple here for you. Just so you know, John's piping in here saying, hey, London still has a Jumbo Video on Adelaide Street. So
get out.
If you're back in the neighborhood. John, if you're still tuning in, let us know if that is if that's still open. I think that's the last one too. I think that's the last Jumbo Video. And speaking of horror movies, Matthew's just piping in here saying, hey, what is your favorite horror movie? Or do you have or maybe one of your favorite horror movies? It's hard to put a button on one, but
yeah, that's a tough one because I have one for like every different genre and subgenre, but I have to say that my recent favorite, I'll just go recent because it's easiest. My recent favorite was Hereditary.
Mine too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't get shaken by anything, like because I've seen them all. I've watched all the lists. I've gone through all the classics, and Hereditary actually really shook me to the core. And what's interesting about it as well, and this is a little bit of a tragic story, but we're good here. It's horror. When my dad passed away at the end of 2019, after we identified the body at the hospital, my mom came home and she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to watch Hereditary." And she was like, "Yeah, I also want to watch Hereditary." Great. So we watched it together, and it hits really differently when you have something like that happen to you, when someone passes away very suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
Ari Aster just captured this atmosphere of grief and dread that I have never seen in a film in my life. And despite the fact that it has some decently really creepy imagery, like you can't really top the fact when Toni Collette cuts off her own head. That's pretty horrifying. But the scariest scene for me was the dinner scene. And it shook me. And I have watched that scene over and over again. And there is not a foul note in that entire moment. It's just absolutely terrifying.
I thought the same thing. And I kind of said, I mean, I liked Hereditary more than Midsommar, but Ari Aster, for both films, he has this weird ability. The only way I can describe it, and I'll tell you the scene in Midsommar as well, was that that scene where it's the circle of women that are all like moaning in unison as she's having this like crazy panic attack, right? And I remember sitting in the theater and I was like, halfway through that scene, it's like, God, this, like, I feel so uncomfortable right now. And the only way I can describe it is like Ari Aster knows how to like open you up and like kind of find a spot inside you and
terrify you
where it feels so awkward and so personal. It's like someone knows a secret about you and you don't know how they know it. And I remember in Hereditary as well, at the end, the scene, well, spoilers alert, sorry. So spoilers, people should have seen this movie already, but the scene where the body kind of floats up into the treehouse is like, I don't know why, I can't explain it, but for some reason that sticks in my head and I replay it in my mind all the time.
For me, it wasn't, so again, like spoilers, seriously, but everybody should have seen this movie. It's just important. But like when Toni Collette cuts off her head And then the head rolls on the ground, and there are two naked people or three naked people
Oh,
standing
yeah.
in the darkness of the room
Uh,
waiting. My
it's just
mouth
chills.
dropped open, and I was like, ha ha ha. Terrified me. And it's funny what you're saying about Midsummer and that scene, because I realized something about it that I don't know if you realize this, but someone had to point it out to me for me to go, oh my God, that's a rape scene. Um, and you do not recognize it because it's a man who's on the receiving end. And what's really interesting about that is the whole thing happens against his will. And because he, of the typical patriarchal dynamics that we're used to, I didn't clue in on that until like 5 days
No.
after I watched it, and someone told me, "Hey, that was like the reason why it's disturbing is it's a rape scene." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." And it just, knowing that adds a new dimension to, I mean, kind of the tragedy of it. So at the end, when he dies, it made me kind of not like him. I didn't like the character at all, but it made me have this sympathy for this guy that I hadn't had before. And I love how Ari Aster just very subtly slipped that under the radar for a lot of people to see if you were paying attention or not to the commentary that he was actually putting in throughout the film.
Yeah, I find him to be one that I love. I love the fact that he isn't rushing out his movies. In
Yeah,
this, and very very similar to Jordan Peele, where the films
yeah,
are very much thought out. You're getting a full product, and I mean the same thing with Us as well. Like there's some flaws in that movie. I wouldn't say it's a perfect film, but I remember watching it being like, I have no idea what's going to happen, and I'm a
yeah,
bit freaked out. And same thing with Hereditary, same thing with Midsummer. I was just like, I don't know where this is going. I have an
yeah,
idea, but everything around the corner is a mystery. And I think that's something that these directors are kind of bringing back to horror, or just bringing back to cinema in general, where it's like, I watch a lot of popcorn movies and I can kind of tell you where they're sort of going to go and where they're going
right.
to end. And that's fine. But I like the idea of being surprised with something new that I haven't seen before. And
Yeah,
because, yeah, I don't know what it is about Ari Aster, something about him being able to articulate tragedy in a weird way. That's like the start of Midsummer. I was like, holy shit,
oh
like
man,
this is crazy. Like I'm like, I'm only like 10 minutes into this thing. So, but he has this uncanny ability to make you feel, and it's not like, it's not sadness. Like it is, it's a component of it for sure. But it's not just like,
yep.
hey, this is sad, you be sad now. It's something where it's like, this
It's
is
grief,
something, yeah, just to make you feel
very real
uncomfortable.
grief.
Yeah. So
Right. Yeah.
anyway, fascinating to see what he's going to come up with next for sure, as well as Jordan Peele. But
Yeah, and also Robert Eggers too. I just want to
yes,
throw out that name. Eggers is fantastic. Him, and so Ari Aster just announced his new movie. It's called Disappointment Boulevard.
okay.
It's got Joaquin Phoenix and Meryl Streep in it, so just that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think he's upping his cast.
He's getting better every time.
Mhm.
And I think it's called The Norseman. That's coming out with Robert Eggers, but he's working with Anya Taylor-Joy again. Bjork is in it. The Skarsgårds are in it. And I love me some Skarsgårds. They're my favorites.
Yeah,
I think they're all in it, and it's going to be fantastic.
I know Anya Taylor-Joy is she's on a hot streak right now. She's going to be like she's going to take off, I think, for sure. Not that she already hasn't, but I just feel like she's in everything I watch now, and she's always excellent. So and I love The Witch too. It's funny, we've mentioned this before in the program, but as a writer and as well as a screenwriter, I think it's probably worth mentioning, but in the script of The Witch, there was a lot of description about how things smelled. And that's what drew a lot of people to the project, was that you could feel like where you were in New England at the time. And that was kind of like that was sort of the idea that he put into that script, which I always thought was interesting, because smells kind of take you to a particular spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that too, because my publisher, actually, a while back, we were talking about kind of creating atmosphere and story, and the underrated things that authors need to tap into more. And one of the things she said is smell is so underrated. describing, so like for me in describing a murder scene, it's like, it's not just what you see on the floor. It's not the body. It's the smell of the blood. It's the smell of like the bone matter, like the bleach when they try to clean up the scene. That's what really starts telling the audience and informing them, like the reader, audience, whatever medium you're doing. That's what lets them know what room you're in and what you're dealing with. Because out of all of the senses for me, the two that creep me out the most or will trigger the creepiest sensations are sound and smell before sight. 100%. It's not what you see, it's what you hear before it happens, and it's what you smell during it. And that's something that I'm not surprised that Eggers put that in The Witch, because you can practically smell that film.
Yeah. And it is funny because there are so many things that are like you said, like they're not necessarily utilized. But if you mention something like can you think of what, gasoline would smell like, or freshly cut grass, or rain, or whatever? Everyone goes, oh yeah, no problem. But can you smell these smells as well? Like, can you remember these smells also? And putting that on the screen. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get. I know there's some movie theaters they have smells that go into them now. They're like whatever they like the 6D theater. I don't know. That might get a bit crazy, but depending on the film you're watching. But it's interesting. I think that sort of sense takes you somewhere else where you might not be if you were just watching something. Speaking of sound, the sound at the end of Hereditary, it's a piano string, right? Which is something you hear and try and figure out what it is. And then you figure out, and then you see what it is. It's something.
And you're like, oh no.
God. This is a bad time. Listen, let's transition a little bit. Speaking of projects and that sort of stuff, you've got a couple of projects coming up in the near future. You've been busy during the pandemic. Lots of stuff going on. Obviously, we're coming out of the pandemic, so we don't need to talk about all the months that we were kind of hoarded away in hibernation or whatever. But what can you tell us about what you've been working on and what you have coming out in the future?
So I have two things that I'm really excited about. So the first one is I was working on a screenplay with Collingwood Film Co., Jesse Cook and Liv Collins, who are just phenomenal people, who have kind of like, they both have experience in directing, producing horror and comedy, kind of, in sort of different mediums throughout the years. And it's called Hell for the Holidays, and it's an amazing thing that actually started as a really funny joke. So I joined them on set for their film King of Kings, and I did a day with them. We were all sitting having lunch, and we started talking about Hallmark films, and I hate them. It's just, as a person who pretty much only watches Lars von Trier and Gaspar Noé movies, it's just not, it's not my thing. Although I do see the appeal in them for sure. Like, some people definitely, I totally understand the comfort viewing aspect of it. And then we were talking about Hallmark and just riffing on a lot of the issues that they've had in the past. For example, like casting of people of color, like the systematic way that the screen, like how it's written, how there's like a very specific type of format, and how all the films kind of feel in the past. They're definitely changing them a little bit more now, which is awesome. But in the past have kind of like fit a very specific type of thing, especially the Christmas films. And Liv actually was like, it'd be hilarious if there was like a Hallmark slasher movie. And I was like, I would like to write you a Hallmark slasher movie. And she's like, I would like for you to write me a Hallmark slasher movie. And I thought it was just a joke, and we would just like, we go home and never talk about it again. But then she was like, no, I actually want you, like, I would actually love for you to write this. So I wrote Hell for the Holidays as kind of a little bit of a riff of a middle of that genre. So the whole film follows kind of the format of a Hallmark film, but it's interspersed with a lot of the slasher. And it's been interesting because, oddly enough, they're kind of not as dissimilar as you think they would be. Is that slasher has sort of the reverse side of Hallmark, where with Hallmark, everything needs to be quite chaste. So like, there's a singular kiss, there's no sex scenes, there's no alcohol imbibed, there's no drugs. And then there's still sort of an emphasis on chastity in slasher, where the people who have sex are the ones who die first. The people who do the drugs are the ones who die first, right? So they're kind of like the exact same genre, but like different sides of the coin and different ways of expressing them. So it was super fun to write that and put those two genres together and create something that I think is completely hilarious and will really speak to people who are fans of both genres and who aren't even fans of both genres, and just kind of like seeing that middle perspective. And I put a little bit of Lynchian weirdness in it because, I mean,
Of course.
a lot of the Hallmark films are surreal in themselves, and so are the slasher movies. And that was a really good time. So it's supposed to go to camera later this year or early next year. I'm so psyched to see it go down. It's still a work in progress, but that's going to be super exciting. And the other one is I wrote a novella called Mantis. I want to say I finished it at the end of 2019, had it edited and submitted it to this phenomenal publishing company in Troy, New York called Clash Books. It was my top choice. They describe themselves as they do a lot of genre bending fiction, a lot of interesting stuff that people don't normally see. So I was really pumped to be like, okay, this is my first choice. It's such a long shot. I'm Canadian. They don't know me. Let's see what happens. And they accepted it. So that's coming out March 2023. Still also in the editing phases. Awesome. But what I can tell you about that is it's basically about a woman who is gang raped at a party by her boyfriend and some of his friends, and she decides to exact revenge by killing them off like a female praying mantis. So she kind of suffers a psychotic break. She starts seeing herself as a mantis, and she starts decapitating them and sort of like luring them into her trap before she does it. And you wouldn't think that people want to read that, or maybe you would, maybe because like you're into horror, you would. But I'm really pumped with it. The editors in chief and the managing editor, Christoph Paul and Lisa Canderel, have just been like, they're the most amazing people, and all of the work that they have at Clash Books is like second to none. Like I bought one of their short story compendiums. It's called Black Telephone magazine, and every story was just terrifying and awesome and weird and heartbreaking. It's like, it's just been a dream to work with them, and I can't wait for the launch.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's those are exciting projects to come out for sure. And also Liv and Jesse from it's Collingwood Film Co., right?
Yep.
Do I have that right? Yeah. Liv was on the show as well, so friends of the program for sure, and big fans of those guys. So which is great. Now, Lauren, I don't know if you've watched our program before, but there is a section in this where we do a rapid fire section. So it's a series of questions, and we're going to put you in the hot seat and throw you some questions and try and get some. This is hard hitting journalism in action. Are you ready? Are you game?
Yes, I'm so ready. Always been ready. Let's go.
Awesome. So just to let everyone know, this section of the program is brought to you by our sponsor, which is Wellington Brewery. They are the oldest brewery in, I think, Ontario. Definitely one of the oldest breweries in Guelph. I'm going to crack this and take a nice swig. Delicious. It's Hell's Lager. Hell's yeah. Welly actually sponsors us usually when we're on the convention circuit, but obviously during pandemic times, they keep us fueled at home as well. So you can check them out, pick up their beers at the LCBO, or you can pop by their brewery, which is in Guelph on Woodlawn Road, and they have a nice, awesome walk-up window, which is pandemic safe, and you can pick up beers there. So anyway, without further ado, Lauren, let's jump in. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so I did a little snooping around on the internet and tried to figure out some great questions for you, and try and hit you with something that you are not going to the least, the most original questions that we could think of, right? So here we go. Okay. So yes or no, Alien 3 is better than Alien Resurrection?
Ooh, no.
No. Okay.
No.
Interesting.
No.
Okay, so you got to pick one. In a dystopian future, all smartphones and computers being outlawed, which alternative way of writing would you pick?
Just give me the paper and the pad. Just the pen and the pad. Give me old school.
Old school? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So help us out. You have a pretty hilarious Twitter feed. What can you tell us about Young Adventure around the house?
Okay, so I have this habit of not completing tasks that are normal because I have ADD and I'll be in the middle of something and I just won't do it. And so it'll be something like I will have cornflakes and then I'll leave like half of the cornflakes out of the box on the cupboard, like or on the kitchen counter, and then my husband Mark will come up and he will discover it and he'll be like, what happened? And for me, I like to say that that's part of the adventure. So I'll yell out, adventure! Why did it happen? No one knows. And he really, truly hates it a lot. But it's like repeated things like I'll just misplace stuff and it'll be in different places. And whenever he discovers it, I'll just yell adventure.
So, so my significant other will kind of do the same thing, where like a plate or something will almost make it back to where it's supposed to be. So like you know what I mean? Like something might make it back to the cupboard, but it's close. Like it's not like it's so far away. It's like just a few extra feet, and it could be where it belongs. But she doesn't care about that, and I have probably some sort of undiagnosed slight OCD where I just like, just put it back. I mean, the dish goes, the cup goes in the cupboards with the rest of the cups, so, but anyway, yeah. I digress. All right. So what next question, what do you want? You're picked by a huge studio to write a reimagining of any intellectual property that you can think of. What property would you pick and why?
Sallow or the 120 Days of Sodom by Pier Paolo Pasolini.
That's what you would reimagine? Okay.
Yes, and I'd switch the sexes so that the sex that was in charge of everything were all women. That's like actually one of my grand dreams. I just really want to do that. I don't know if anyone would ever watch it, but I think it would be a really interesting project to explore.
Okay, and fair enough. And tell us more. So our actor Mark Gibson fairly well. In fact, we hope to have him on the program in the future. Can you share a funny story about him?
Oh man, he's so funny. I think my favorite thing about him is that he tells, and this is not even a favorite thing, I just have so many, but he has had this habit over the past couple of years of telling me very plausible lies and just leaving me with them for an extended period of time and seeing how far he can make me believe them. So as an example, like many years ago, I had very short hair and he would just kind of trim the back of my neck and he did a really good job of it. And I was like, oh my God, you're so good at this. How do you know how to do this? And he would be like, oh, well, I was a barber in Winnipeg back in the day. And he was like, it's how I made some subsidiary money. And then, it's really helped. And you wouldn't not believe that, would you?
No.
Total lie.
Total lie.
Left me for weeks. I started mentioning it to some other people who he knew, and they were all laughing and I was like, what? And he was like, that absolutely never happened. And another one is like, he was in this film called X of Humanity many years ago.
Yeah.
And Brian Cox was the narrator of it. So he told me this story of him and Brian Cox like hanging out and having a really good time. And like, they had these cute nicknames for each other. Never happened. Let me thought that happened for so long. And
Best friends.
Like, and he was like, no, Brian Cox did everything from a studio. Never met him in my life.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, that's a precursor for everyone out there. We hope to have Mark on the program at some point in the future to talk about obviously all the films that he's done, including Exit Humanity. So hopefully we'll get enough requests. We'll try and convince him to jump on here at some point. I had a bonus question because I felt it was, we wanted to keep you humble a little bit to maybe just we don't want to tarnish anything, but maybe just kind of break your character of horror street cred a little bit. But this is your bonus question: is that Tom Brady gets traded to the Dallas Cowboys? Yourself, a big NFL fan, would you say out loud, "How about them Cowboys?" and cheer them on with the rest of Team Black Fawn?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm like, this is so, people hate this, but I'm such a Brady bandwagoner. I didn't care about football at all until I met Mark. He got me into it. I think they've won Brady has won 4 Super Bowls since we've been together. And he's just such a phenomenal player. It doesn't matter where he goes. He could go to the Dolphins, who I hate. And I would be like, yeah, Dolphins for a year or however long he stayed.
Well, he probably won a championship, right? Like, so.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I don't know why every team tries to have him.
I remember when one of the times we first met, it was on, Chad's luxurious rooftop sports bar, tiki lounge bar, or bar that he has up there, which is obviously being transplanted to another city now. But he was like, do you know Mark and Lauren? I go, yeah, I think we've met before. And he said, oh yeah, they're big football fans. And I was just like, really? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, Lauren's like a bigger football fan. He might be a bigger football fan than Mark. I was like, really? Like, it was just because we never talked about like football, right? I mean, it's not like we were always at film festivals. Really got into it.
I have emotional problems when they aren't winning. Like, so just as part of the thing that's going on in my life as well, I'm 7 months pregnant now, but I was pregnant when the Bucks were playing. Congrats. Thanks. Yeah. So I was really concerned. I was like, man, how much can I jump around during the Super Bowl? Like, am I going to be able to deal with this? Is the stress going to just like whack me out? Am I going to pass out? And like, it's gotten to the point that if the Bucks are down or if Brady's team is down, I'll just put it that way, I have to go for a walk. I can't talk to anyone. The Super Bowl where the Pats were playing the Falcons and they were down, like, I think it was 3-28 at halftime. I was like, this is bullshit. I can't be here anymore. I gotta get out of the house. I can't be here. And Mark was like, Lauren, it's going to be okay. They're going to win. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you don't know any of this. I need to go for a walk. And somehow he convinced me to stay to see what happened next, which I'm glad he did.
Now, and for those of you who don't know, that's the greatest Super Bowl to ever be played is that game.
Oh my God.
It's insane. Ended in overtime. And it was, what was it, Super Bowl 50? I think it was Super Bowl 50 or 51, maybe 50.
I think it was 51. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe it either. I remember somebody online afterwards said, if you don't believe like in the simulation, like, did it not seem like two people were playing a video game and they had just switched controllers at halftime? And that's the best way I can describe it. But yeah, what a phenomenal game. But anyway, just wanted to throw in a quick NFL question. Always, I like getting a question in there about the Dallas Cowboys somehow. So anyway, thanks again, Lauren. That's rapid fire again, brought to you by Wellington Brewery, Hell's Lager, Hell's Yeah. Thanks for being such a good sport about it. We try and keep it loosey and goosey, but try to throw in some curveballs there as well. Just throwing it back out to our audience right now. We just have we've got just a couple comments from John. John says, "Boo! I'm a Dolphins fan."
I'm so sorry, John.
Yeah, so sorry, John. Sorry about that. But his follow-up question was that how do you deal with writer's block, which I think is a great question for aspiring writers, screenwriters, anyone who's kind of looking to develop a project. I mean, it's very, very common to hit that wall where you're like, I've got half a project that I'm really proud of, but I don't know how to kind of finish it or really bring it home. Like, how do you deal with that?
So one of the things that I recommend is just being a writer is the first thing that you have to do is just write. And it doesn't matter what comes out. The first time you write something, I can 100% it's not going to be perfect. And sometimes it's not even going to be very good. The key is just to get it out. For me, if I'm having problems just getting the writing out, I will take small breaks throughout a session. So I will get up, I will go, I'll have a snack, I'll take a walk, I'll put my earphones on, I'll put on some music, I'll go for a little walk around the block, I'll pace back and forth. I just do something physical for a little bit. Like I get my body moving. Doing a workout's really good too. And I find that just the physicality helps to loosen up sort of the mechanism that helps you actually get back into what you're doing. And that works for absolutely anything that you're doing. Like if you're having a tough day at work, if you're working from home, anything at all, that the physical movement of the body will help to release any of the tension that's blocked you.
So what's the long, speaking of that, because I know I've talked to a lot of writers and screenwriters before of them saying, and this is pretty common, I don't think it's advice that anyone has not heard, but walking away from a project, coming back to it with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh, just a fresh mindset. Do you end up doing that with certain projects? And what's the longest amount of time that you've been away from a project and come back to it and sort of finished it off?
Wow. I actually did that with Mantis. I actually had a big run where I was full speed ahead on it. I was writing a lot. I got a full-time job at that point. And, your job will obviously get in the way of your process. So I left it for probably, I want to say 7 to 8 months. And then when my dad passed away in Nova Scotia and I went back for a month, I was just like, well, I'm just going to finish the rest of it. And I used that time to just full speed ahead and do it. But I mean, if there was a library of unfinished material in this world, it would be the world's biggest library. It would be absolutely like aeons and aeons of rooms. So part of the challenge is just finishing something, but you can always go back. You can always go back to any project. You can always relook at something. The first book I ever wrote was a complete and utter disaster. I self-pubbed it. It was not good. It needed better eyes. It needed a better team. It needed a certain amount of attention that I wasn't able to get or pay for at the time. And who's to say that in 10 years I might not go back to it? I might. Neil Gaiman, I took a masterclass with him on the masterclass website, which I highly recommend for all writers. And he said, I still have things in my attic that sometimes I pick out and rewrite and do something new with.
Mm-hmm. And lots of it's funny, like a lot of singer-songwriters will do that too. They'll say, here's a brand new track. I've had this track for 20 years. Just never knew what to do with it. Didn't really fit on an album that I was doing. So now here it is. And it's like a 20-year-old song, which is interesting, right? So and obviously sounds different when you kind of listen to it, or even with a book, I guess, read it.
Yeah, Tom Waits, who's like my favorite singer-songwriter of all time. He has an entire album called Orphans, which is all music that he just as he said, got lost behind the stove. And all of them are gold, but they were just things that he had tossed aside, or things that he said didn't fit on an album. And it's like a quadruple vinyl that's just beautiful. Yeah.
And Tom Waits, a great actor in his own right as well.
Totally.
So listen, before we talked about the projects that you have that you've completed, they're almost to the finish line. They're coming out shortly or going to camera soon. What do you have? We're coming out of this post-pandemic. Now we're not locked down anymore. We're getting back out into the world. What are your plans, your future writing plans? Let's say coming later this year. Do you have anything lined up or anything you'd like to work on?
So for the moment, I'm actually I'm working on a couple of things. Actually, Mark and I are trying to develop some things on our own. So we've actually discovered that writing together is a lot of fun, although it's the only time where we actually fight with each other or clash. A lot of fun, but it's a really good process. So we're working on a couple of things. Adventure, exactly. But the other thing is I've just been kind of playing with some projects on my own. So there's one script that I'm playing with called Zombie, spelled ZOM-BE, that is about a woman who wants to desperately be a self-help guru, who gets chosen to go to a convention with this master, Tony Robbins-esque self-help guy, to learn from him one-on-one. And while she's at this convention, there's a zombie invasion. And all of the self-help gurus decide they're going to try to reason with the zombies. And the whole commentary of it is just the toxicity of the self-help industry, and how ultimately to survive, this woman needs to subvert her idea that, she's in control, and actually take control of the situation in order to escape.
Right.
So that's what I'm writing for Larfs right now. I want to bring it somewhere eventually, and I think that it would probably be a really awesome ride. It's in my head, it's gonna be total Dead Alive at the end. So We'll see how that goes. And I'm just writing some short stories and stuff. I mean, when this kid exits me in September, that's obviously going to be a little bit of a time constraint in terms of like how much I'm going to be able to do.
I thought you were going to say once they arrive, like, you know, I'll have all this free time. But
you know, I will have no free time for a bit. But eventually, they'll get to a point where they can subsist on their own, at least for 2 hours at a time, so the work can go back to it. There will be some work on Mantis that'll happen as well in this time. But yeah, that's kind of just where I'm going from here. And I'm just excited to do more stuff. And as the pandemic has kind of is starting to wander down, I hope to connect with more people in the city and I'm in, and just keep working and just doing what I love. It's such an honor and such a privilege to be able to do the creative stuff that you really enjoy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, listen, on that note, I won't take up any more of your time. Thanks so much for joining us. Just throwing this up on the screen. If you want to follow Lauren on Instagram, you can follow her at the Lauren and Messervey, right?
Messervey, so close.
Messervey. So I knew I was going to screw this up. Because you're like, you'll be fine. As soon as anyone says that before I go on the air, it's not fun. So
it's
Messervey,
totally
it's Messervey. You told me this, Messervey with a V on the end, on a V near the end. But and also follow Black Fawn Distro on Instagram at Black Fawn Distro. But obviously, congratulations on all the new things happening in your life. And obviously, I'm glad you like Winnipeg, but also congratulations on Mantis coming out. You said that spring 2023 currently, and Hell for the Holidays, which is the film that you wrote, is going to camera hopefully later this year.
Yep, exactly. And if you follow me, I'll keep you posted and let you know when the news comes out.
Awesome. Well, stick around just after we go off air. Stick around. We'll just do a little bit of a postmortem and just our sign off. Just let everyone know. Listen, stay safe and help out. We are so close to being out of this mess that the world is in right now. So make sure you wear a mask when you need to, get your shot if you can, wash your hands, practice social distancing, all that stuff. And obviously, most importantly, check in with your family and friends, make sure everyone's okay. We're almost there, kids. Stick around. And obviously we'll be back in another couple weeks for another edition of Takeover Tuesday. I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and this is my guest today, Lauren. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us, and it was a fun time. Hopefully it was an enjoyable experience, but we do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this and joining us live tonight on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube.
It was awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. All right, take care, guys.